Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me in the back? Or shall I get... No, I think I can do without the microphone. This paper, or this presentation, comes from another paper that was invited by my colleagues in the Cleaner Production Center in Serbia. They've been working on chemical leasing for a number of years. And they told me, oh, we want to write a paper, can you help us? And I said, yes, so let's look at what you have. And they had a very nice case study, which if you want I can send you the paper or the papers. So we started setting chemical leasing, which has, we have a lot of examples, empirical examples, case studies, but there were no papers available. So we set it up within the context of green chemistry and collaboration. And after finishing that paper, we had 5 questions. So we thought, being good academics, let's answer the questions by writing another paper. And then we wrote this paper, and now we have 10 more questions. So, we've been talking a lot about green chemistry, and we all know that it's about reducing the negative impacts to the environment, and in many cases also to health of workers and health of communities. We want to prevent waste, and you're probably all familiar with the 12 principles of green chemistry of Anastas. Yeah? We also we've been seeing the whole day of today the use of catalysts, the use of new materials, the use of new ways of doing things, whether it's through microwaves or any other way, so that you can reduce the temperature or you can reduce the pressure, and you can therefore reduce costs, reduce the impacts to the environment, and of course reduce safety, as we were talking in the previous presentation. There have been 2 main initiatives on green chemistry. Most of the examples today have focused on the second one, which is the science part. Let's look at the molecules, let's look at the processes, let's look at the industrial applications, and therefore we can move green chemistry forward. We also have the other side, the bureaucrats and politicians side, which you have the REACH and REACH-like regulations all around Europe, and they're very tight, they're very controlling. You cannot release so much waste, or you have to create an inventory of your raw materials and all of those things, which tend to be really, really annoying for engineers and for managers and for everybody else, because so you have somebody. You hear a bird? Can you hear a bird? Or is it just in my head? No, I told you, shut up. Oh. So you have the policy initiative side and the science side. We've been seeing a lot of examples today on the science. But lately, we've had another strand that complements the 2 previous ones, which is, hey, we can make money out of this. Traditionally, the business models have been, I'll sell you 1 ton of sulfuric acid as a catalyst or as a solvent. I'll sell you 2 tons of lubricant, or things like that, which is the traditional way. We are seeing now a movement from the traditional sell the kilograms or the liters of product towards, hey, I'll sell you a service. I won't sell you a kilogram, but I will sell you the service of lubricating, for example, 3 meters of a band, or the amount of product that you'll be producing, because I'm selling you a catalyst, and my catalyst has a conversion rate of 80%, 90%, or even 20%, but I'm selling you the service of, which is what we're having over here. In general, we talk about 3 types. They are fairly similar, depending on how you do it. One is renting, one in the middle, which is as you rent a house. You also have leasing, which is a longer term, more closely relationship between the person who leases and the lessee, so the person who gets it, the lessee and the lessor. And then you have the product pooling, where you not only lease the product, but you also lease particular machinery, or you install particular equipment that will allow you to use that particular product that you're selling. Remember that all of this has to be based with green chemistry, the 12 principles of green chemistry. So we are now bringing green chemistry part, have the policy initiatives, the science initiatives, and we're bringing the money which engineers sometimes forget, that things cost a lot of money. Who was, Jesus, right? We're talking about platinum catalyst, right? Yes. How much is a pound of platinum? An ounce of platinum. I know that an ounce of gold is about 1,000 pounds, give or take. Give or take. So platinum might be about 2,000, 3,000, a little bit. Chemical leasing was developed by UNIDO back in the 2007 in the conference in Dubai. It's part of the chemical management services that have been running in the US for a long time, but then UNIDO decided together with the Austrian and the German governments and the Ministry of Environment, they say, hey, why don't we do this as a new initiative and help, therefore, producers and users to become more environmentally oriented. And it is focusing, as I said, on the principles of green chemistry. Let's reduce the amount of hazardous materials. Let's reduce the amount of materials if we can. Let's try to use more and better catalysts. Let's do more of a life cycle thinking rather than, hey, I sell you the product and I don't care what happens afterwards. That's more or less what I've already been telling you. It's a service oriented. It's not about selling a product. It's about selling a service. There's, of course, more efficient use of the materials, reduce of risk. You also want to protect human health, which we were talking about safety. So let's try to avoid all those materials that are highly explosive and bad for the communities, bad for the environment, in the entire life cycle of the product. And also because it's UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, they want access to new markets for producers. All of this is based in collaboration. It's about, most cases, it's about having a third party, whether it's cleaner production centers, which are usually financed by UNIDO, or a consultancy company. For example, in the Netherlands we have Royal Hoskanning, RHDHV, who brokers the deals and sets of the agreements between the producer and the user. And therefore, you want to have thus optimizing the financial benefits for both. Now we're not talking about, I'm the producer, I'm going to be making lots of money. Or I'm the user, I'm going to be making lots of money. No, now it becomes a system, where the system, the gains in the system have to be bigger than those in the previous type. If it doesn't work like that, forget it, don't go into chemical leasing. Okay? But you have to broker those legal agreements, financial agreements, you have to set up what they call the functional unit. So before I was charging you per kilogram, now I'm going to charge you by hour of lubrication, or by, as I said, the yield of the product, or what. So that becomes a little bit complicated. You have to have payback for all of the players, 2 or 3 players. So the user, the producer, and in the case of a commercial third party, for example, Royal Hoskanning, they also have to make money. Cleaner production centers in the world, they get the money from UNIDO, so they subsidize it. Of course, it's not easy. Entering into collaboration is not easy. You have to do the coordination costs. You have the vulnerability cost. What happens is, if I am a user and you are the producer of that product, and that is the only product that you can get because it's environmentally friendly, and you go bankrupt. I go bankrupt because I can't do it with another producer. In the traditional system, I buy a product from DuPont, DuPont stops making it, I can buy it from Dow, or I can buy it from somebody else. So there are some difficulties in that way. You also have information, who and how you broker those agreements. How much information does the producer give to the user, or the user needs from the producer? And can you really trust the third party? How do you split the gains? How do you set the new prices? And as I said before, you go and check the prices of a catalyst, more or less, you can get it from the producers. But now you're not talking about kilograms or tons. Now you're talking about a service. How do you set it up? And how do you make the producer and the user agree on a price that is good for both of them. You also have the case of free riding, which never happens in the universities and students, right? The students in the universities never happens. So what happens when you have one of the parties that's free riding on the back of the other one? In the particular case of chemical leasing, the third party tends to broker this deal. And they say, okay, you producer tell me what can you produce, you just tell me what you can use, and then I broker that strategic agreement, but also the legal agreement, which is very important. And the legal part is still under explored. I told you I had 10 more questions after this one. We still don't know exactly how those legal agreements can be brokered and how do you set up all those things. I'm not a lawyer by nature, and I hope I never become one, but I have to learn a little bit of legal issues. How do you relate that to reach? For example, if you were to have a producer in South Holland, in the Netherlands, and a user in Belgium, you have two different legal settings. Because in the Netherlands, they might consider the product as a raw material, but in Belgium, they might consider it a waste. Two completely different legal settings. That I've been telling you quite a lot. It's about making money for the user and the producer. If he doesn't make money, forget it. As simple as that, don't do it. Of course, you want to reduce the use of materials. You want to eliminate the use of hazardous materials, the 12 principles of green chemistry. You want to avoid any impacts to human health. These are the two examples. I'm glad to be talking to people who have a technical background, because sometimes I show these to social scientists and they go like, hey! So on top you have the traditional linear approach, where you have the raw materials coming in from my right, your left. They go to the producer. The producer changes these materials, sells them to the user, and then the user has to take them to the waste management company and pay for that. They have the formulas over there. In the chemical leasing projects, what you do is you have a recycling loop. Yeah, it becomes much more complicated, but you can reduce the amount of raw materials that you're taking for the entire system considerably. You can reduce to about 90, sometimes even 99.9, especially if we're talking about platinum. There are some cases about platinum where the recovery rate is 99.99%. It's very expensive, and you really want to recover it. Of course, the chemical user might still have some waste, and the producer might still have some waste. But in this case, the producer, being a chemical company, has a core competence to deal with those chemicals. Which sometimes, most of the time, the users don't have those core competences to deal with the chemicals, because they're just using them as lubricants or catalysts, solvents. There's, of course, lots of critiques. What happens with my dependency of the chemicals that I have to use? As I mentioned, the lock-in collaboration. How do we sign those contracts? How long-term is long-term? You cannot implement it to all chemicals. It's being implemented to non-reactants. So solvents, catalysts, lubricants, and there's a bunch of lists over there. If it ends up in the product, hey, that's not leasing, because I cannot recover it. So you need to recover it. Still trying to clearly define the scope of this. Still quite new. What skills and competences do you need in the user and the producer? Because if you're a big user, who is buying the products? Usually somebody from the procurement department, who have little or no training about this. They just want kilograms of a particular material. They don't want to think, hey, it's about the hours and the number of bottles that you can clean or this. So you have to retrain your people. As I said, we answered a number of questions with this paper. More questions came out. So we discussed in the paper that the types of chemicals. So it's non-reactive chemicals that are indirectly used in the processes. Catalysts, solvents, lubricants. We also talk about percentage of recovery, and in the percentage of recovery we went to the leasing, business management leasing literature that says that anything about 75% is considered to be a leasing. The examples that we have in chemical leasing, they talk about 75 to, from 75, 80% up to 100. Well, 100 we can't really achieve it because of mass balances and Lavoisier is still around, at least in principle. So anything above 75%. We also talk about the focus of the concept, which is, hey, 12 principles of green chemistry and sustainable chemistry. You have to reduce the negative impacts to the environment, to societies, reduce the amount of hazardous chemicals, reduce the amount of chemicals that you're using. We also talk about the company system. In the company system we talk about 5 major settings: operations and processes, strategy and management, organizational systems, procurement and marketing, and assessment and communication. This one is particularly focusing on operations and processes with a little bit of procurement. Of course, you need to integrate it within many other sustainability activities in the company. It's not only that you have to do. You're not a seller anymore. You don't sell products. You become a service provider. So that changes the mentality of the former producer. And of course you have to change your strategy, you have to change the way that you do business. We're going to be setting a price for a service. And as I said, talking to the people in UNIDO and Royal Haskoningen, they deal with that on an everyday basis. And it becomes quite complicated. Some of them are fairly straightforward, some are very, very difficult to set up that price. Also, how can you incorporate the indirect costs? So steam, cooling water, electricity, labor, and all of those things. That's still to be explored. I mentioned a little bit of collaboration. Yes, it's great, it has a great potential, but what are the costs? How do you set up those costs? How do you set up those agreements? And how do you avoid potential issues between the parties? And also, how close do the parties need to be? Because if the seller is in China and the user is in Spain, it's a little bit complicated, isn't it? We also talk about sustainability's dimensions, and we've been kind of touching them a little bit, and Francisco mentioned 3 of them yesterday. He forgot one of the most important ones, although he kind of touched it indirectly. We talk about economic dimension, environmental dimension, social dimension, and the time dimension, as indicated by the Bronson report. This generation, next generation, and the next generation, and of course how they interact. In green chemistry you have mainly economic and environmental. Sustainable chemistry you are the social, and of course if you are the long-term agreement you have the time dimension. And in this particular paper we came out with this definition of chemical leasing, which is a little bit stricter and a bit more robust than the one provided by UNIDO, which it says, more or less, it's a business model. So you have to make money for everybody, not just for the producer or the user, so for the entire system. The entire system has to gain. It's based on collaboration between 2 or more industrial partners. You have to reduce environmental impacts and the societal impacts. Again, principles of green chemistry. And you have to have a high recovery rate, higher than 80%, 80% and higher than that. That includes catalysts, lubricants, and solvents, and a bunch of other things. Good candidates for those ones are those that have high risk for human health or the environment, or have a high value in this way. And now we're trying to write a project proposal pushing this even forward, so that we have material flows, economic flows, legal agreements, how do you engage with people, what's driving it, what's stopping it, how do you overcome all of those things. It has a great potential to help the chemical industry become more sustainability oriented. We have many cases, empirical cases. In literature, there are 3 papers on chemical leasing, although there are some more on CMS, chemical management services, which are slightly different. But there's a high increase of researchers wanting to get into least on the academic side, as I said. Practice, we have plenty. I've already kind of told you the last point. We have more and more questions, and hopefully we will be able to answer them next year. And then I have to invite you to the global conference next year in Sitges, which you all have read. I have to invite you. And that's about all for today. Thank you very much. Gracias.